it's a sad state of affairs. But anyway, appreciate y'all being here this morning. 1 Samuel chapter number 14. For those of y'all who weren't here last week, we were in 1 Samuel chapter number 14. We're just kind of teaching down through the verses, and just a quick refresher. So 1 Samuel 14, here the Philistines in chapter number 13, the Philistines have come out against Saul, and they've come out in force. But Saul has sent the people away, and so he's down to about 600. He's down to about 600 men that's with him. And so when you get to chapter number 14, Jonathan and actually Saul is going to be sitting under a pomegranate tree, and Jonathan and his armor bearer are there, and Jonathan says, "Hey, you know what? Let's just get up and let's just do something." And so they go up and they go over, and Jonathan and his armor bearer make a plan, and Jonathan's like, "Hey, we're going to go up and we're going to show ourselves, and we'll show ourselves. If they say come up to us, then God has delivered them in our hand." And I really like his armor bearer in verse number 7 says, "His armor bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart, turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart." Now, if you remember from the end of chapter number 13, it says that only Saul and Jonathan had a sword. And so here's this armor bearer, and this armor bearer here's Jonathan with this, again, if you think about it militarily, here's two people going up against, however, they end up killing 20 people in like a half acre of land. But if you think about it militarily, here's one guy with a weapon, another guy that's bearing his armor, but he doesn't even have a weapon as far as we know. And yet, because Jonathan had faith in God, he said, "Hey, we don't, God's not bound, so let's go see what happens here." But Jonathan, I brought it up last week, and we're going to talk about it more this week. Jonathan, he had the right perspective. Jonathan said it's for Israel, but you're going to see that Saul says they're my enemies. And Saul made it everything about himself, and Jonathan made it for Israel. Jonathan wasn't doing it for his own honor, for his own glory. He wasn't doing it to try and build his own name. He said, hey, similar to how David said, whenever David comes up with Goliath, he's like, "Hey, is there not a cause? Like, he can't talk about our God like that. He can't say those things. I can't believe you guys," and he didn't say this, but you understand, it's kind of implied. "I can't believe you guys have sat around for as long as you've sat around for 40 days and listened to him talk like that. Somebody should have done something." And so Jonathan's like, "Hey, we're going to do this for Israel." And so they go up and they expose themselves, and the Philistines make fun of them and say, "Hey, you've come up out of your holes. Look at this. You come up out of your hiding place." And Jonathan's like, "Well, there, you heard it. They said it." And so they have to crawl on their hands and on their knees. They have to crawl on their hands and knees to get up to them. But when they get up to them, Jonathan starts with his sword, and it says that his armor bearer was slaying after him. And so you get to that, and then in verse number 17, the Philistines, after those 20 men were slain, the Philistines they turn on themselves. They turn on themselves, and they start fighting themselves as they're fleeing. And you get down to verse number 17. "Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, Number now and see who's gone from us." And so they look around, and they're like, "Well, it's Jonathan and his armor bearer that are gone." And so then Saul, in verse number 18, "And Saul said unto Ahiah, Bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel." Now you're going to see something right here, and again, which y'all that have been here for a little while, I'm pretty critical of Saul, and I'll probably remain that way until the day I die. But anyway, here's Saul, and if he had the ark of God and he had the priest of the Lord there with him, instead of just hanging out under that pomegranate tree doing nothing, maybe that was the time that he should have been, inquiring, "God, well, what do we need to do about this? There's only 600 men with me. There's only 600 men with me. The Philistine army has all these chariots and all these horsemen, and they're as the sand of the sea, and they have all the weapons, and it's just me and Jonathan with weapons. God, what are we going to do about this? But if you remember from the previous chapters how Samuel had already come and rebuked him and said God was going to establish a kingdom, but now he's not. And so now here's Saul, and now's when it's time to pray. Now's when it's time to pray. And I'm sure we all see people and know people that it seems like they always choose the wrong time. Okay, guys, it's time to be spiritual now. And that's what I see in this chapter of Saul. He tries to be spiritual in this chapter, but it's at the wrong time. And so now he's like, bring up the ark. And then it says in verse 19, it came to pass while Saul talked unto the priest that the noise was in the host of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priest, withdraw thine hand. He's like, I don't need you now. Withdraw your hand. Stop. I don't need you. And again, like I said, people who are only pretending to be spiritual, like once the problem starts to get solved, guess what? They don't need the preacher anymore. You see people that make professions of faith, a lot of times they'll come in and they're looking for a problem to be solved. If their relationship, if they're having trouble in their marriage, Miss Jimmy, they'll go to church for a little while. Sometimes if they're in trouble with the law, they'll come to church. They'll come to church and they're just pray for me. I got my court date. I got to go before the man or whatever. However their terminology is when they say it. But as soon as they find out, we're going to give you probation. Guess what? You couldn't find them with the FBI. GBI couldn't locate them, even with their ankle monitored on. You couldn't find them. And so, might not be a bad idea to put an ankle monitor on people that come to church like that. But anyway, you understand, like here are these people, and they only need God when they need God, but as soon as they don't think they need God, then they don't need God anymore. And Saul was this way. Here is Saul, and Samuel had rebuked him, so he said, well, I'm going to go get me a different priest. So he got this priest, and he's like, hey, I need you to pray. Oh, stop praying. I don't need you to pray right now. And so now Saul hears, and so now they assemble themselves and they join the battle. And we talked about it last week how that there were Hebrews that were with the Philistines, and they turned on the Philistines. And there were also, in verse 22, it's likewise all the men of Israel which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim. And so now these are people that have hid themselves because they were afraid. And again, they had a leader that didn't do anything to instill confidence in them. And so now here they are, they're hiding. But when they hear that the Philistines are on the run, now all of a sudden they're ready to join the fight. And so, again, and I mentioned last week, but you think, how dependable could you be on these people that hid themselves? As soon as the battle starts going in another direction, what are they going to do, Brother Parks? They're going to run. Which makes what Jonathan and his armor bearer did all the more special, all the more praiseworthy, even though I don't believe that's what he wanted, because he fought for Israel, not for himself. All the more praiseworthy that he had faith in God and said, hey, God can do this. God's not bound to do this with a big army. We don't have to have superior numbers. We don't have to have superior military. We don't have to have any of that. We have what we need, and that's our God. And he can do it for us. And so in verse number 23 it says, so the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Bethaven, and the men of Israel were distressed. Why were they distressed? They were distressed because of Saul. Again, there's 600 men, and Saul decides, look at what he says, that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged of mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. Now, again, I understand that there are times to be fasting. There are times to be fasting. And some of us, sometimes you fast for spiritual reasons. Jesus said, this cometh out but by prayer and fasting. And so there are times to fast. Then if you're overweight and have chubby cheeks like me, sometimes it's a good idea to not eat at those times either. And so I understand fasting. But I also understand that when you fast, you're not as strong as you are whenever you're eating a proper diet. Like, I have been fasting, and I can tell I start feeling pretty weak. And so here's Saul, and again, like I said, if you have your military, you don't want a weak military. You don't. I understand that's what sorry, Brother Wayne. I understand that's what the liberals want. They want the U.S. military to be their social engineering field. But that's not what we want. We want a lean, mean fighting machine. And so here you have Saul, and Saul sitting there, and he's under that pomegranate tree, and he's not praying, and he's not asking his priest, hey, what does God want us to do about this situation? He's sitting there stewing like, you know what, this is ridiculous. These people are my enemies. These people are my enemies. And God needs to do something about it. So you know what? You guys are not allowed to eat. That way, when we do fight, you're going to be weak when we fight. There was no sense in this. There was no logic in it, and it was all personal. And if you're most of the time, if you're just reacting or acting on a personal grudge, you're not being spiritual. If you're reacting on a personal grudge, if you have a grudge against somebody, you can try and make it look spiritual. You can kind of say some spiritual things. But if you're reacting on a personal grudge, and it's not about you, because Jesus, and obviously we understand the Philistines were their enemy, but Jesus wanted us to love our enemies. He wanted us to do good to them that despitefully use us. And so, but here's Saul, and he made it about him. And so it says in verse 25, and all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. Now, I'll tell y'all a story. Many years ago, Brother Jones, that comes here and preaches, his first wife, that Miss Kathy, whenever she had her accident, which would have been in 2005, I think she had her accident in 2005 because her son was at the Bush inauguration. They had to get him out of the second Bush inauguration. So she had her accident in 2005, and they asked, and so she was going to have something done, and they were having surgery. She was going in, and basically it was going to determine whether she was going to be paralyzed completely or from the waist down. And so they asked everyone to fast and pray. So most of y'all know my job, that I go in and out of all kinds of different plants. And me and Brother Parks were talking this morning. We were talking about things we like sugar and bread, and I actually don't really care much for bread. But if you are fasting, so I was fasting for Miss Jones, and we were all, like I said, our churches all over the country were praying for her. And that was the day, Brother Wayne, that they sent me to Flowers Bakery. And Flowers Bakery makes the rolls for they were making sub rolls, and they're making these honey butter rolls and stuff like that. And where the maintenance office is and where the air compressor room is in two different locations. Now, I will tell you, if all you ever had to walk by was where they were mixing the dough, you wouldn't ever think about eating rolls. You would never think about it. But where the maintenance office is, you had to walk right as the rolls come out of the oven, and they come around like that. And the guys that work there could actually just walk over and reach up, pick up a roll, and take it straight to the break room and eat. For us, we weren't supposed to do that, because it was supposed to go through the scanner to make sure there was no metal in it before we were allowed to eat them. But anyway, if you are fasting, even if you don't like bread, and you have to walk by them honey butter rolls about 5 times that day, Brother Parks, them things look so good. They look so good, and they smelled so good. Like I said, if you get on the other end where they're mixing the dough, it smells so bad. I'm like, I would never eat one of them things. But you get on the other end, you're like, that thing looks so good. If I just had a little bit of butter right now, I could put on that thing and eat that thing. And so you imagine, here are these military men that are about to engage in a fight, and they're hungry, and they walk into this wood, and everywhere they look, there's honey on the ground. God told them they were going to a land that flows with milk and honey. And here is honey on the ground. And every one of those men that heard Saul say, "Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening," looked at that honey and said, "Is it worth it? I sure am hungry. I tell you what, I could really use a boost from that honey right now." And every one of those men said, I don't want to endure the wrath of Saul. I'd rather face the Philistines weak than face the wrath of Saul for eating this honey. And when the people were come into the wood, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath, wherefore he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. And so again, like I said, if you've ever been hungry, you know, a lot of times if you fasted or you've been hungry, you think, oh, I'm going to eat the biggest meal. That's not how it works. You just want just a little bit. Just a little bit. And so here just dipping the end of his rod, just the end of his rod, and eating that honey. And it says his eyes were enlightened. And so Jonathan has regained his strength. Then verse 28 says, then answered one of the people and said, thy father straitly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed be the man that eateth any food this day. And the people were faint. So here's Jonathan. He looks around, and again he's already went up, and he's had his fight with the Philistines, and now the Philistines are on the run, and the army of Israel, the very small army, it's more than 600 now because some of the people that were with the Philistines have come back, and some of the people that were hiding come out of their places they were hiding. So it's more than 600 now. But because of Saul's oath, they're weak. And they're faint. And look at what Jonathan said in verse 29. Then said Jonathan, my father hath troubled the land. My father hath troubled the land. And again, why did he trouble the land? Because it was a personal grudge. It wasn't he was the king of Israel. The Philistines were Israel's army, or Israel's enemy, and God's enemy. But he made it about him. And he made this oath about him. And instead of saying, strengthen yourselves, because when we do fight, there's only so much of us, and God's going to have to fight for us. No, he said, hey, I need to be avenged of mine enemies. So Jonathan said, my father hath troubled the land. He said, he's troubled the land. He said, look at what he's done. He said, My eyes have been, he said, my father troubled the land. See, I pray you how mine eyes have been enlightened because I tasted a little of the honey. He said, I just needed just a little bit. Just a little bit, and it picked me up. But all you guys are standing around here, and you're faint. If you do have a weapon now, maybe they picked up some of the Philistines' weapons. If you do have a weapon now, you're having trouble holding it in your hand. You're having trouble holding it up because you're weak and you're faint. Verse 30, how much more if haply the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found? For had there not been now a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? So as we go through this, again, if you remember from weeks ago, David said Saul and Jonathan were beautiful. And I can see it in Jonathan. I don't see much of it in Saul. And so here's Jonathan saying, hey, he said, the victory that we celebrate today, obviously it's God's victory, but it could have been so much more had y'all been prepared to fight. It could have been so much more had you been ready to fight, had you been in shape to fight, had you been in physical condition to fight. It could have been so much more, and because of a poor decision from my father, it wasn't what it could have been. In verse number 31, it explains, and they smote the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon, and the people were very faint. So there it is again. And the people flew upon the spoil. So now look, so not only are they not going to have a victory that they should have had, not only are they not going to have a victory that they should have had, now they're going to commit a sin against God because they're going to start eating the fresh meat with the blood and not cook the meat because they were so hungry. And so now that Saul has been avenged of his enemies, now it's okay to eat. Saul's now been avenged of his enemies. There's Philistine bodies laying all over the place. And now Saul's like, all right, it's good to eat now. And Jonathan said, had they just been able to take the spoil when they come into the Philistine camp, and there's the food, if they could have just ate some of that food. They didn't even have to have the honey. If they just could have had some of that food, it'd have been better than what it was. But now here they are, and they're so hungry. It says they fly upon the spoil, and they took sheep and oxen and calves and slew them on the ground, and the people did eat them with the blood. Now, I was talking to John White last night whenever we were at the visitation thing, and I'm a well done man. I've always been a well done man, and people judge me harshly for that. Because they say, the food's dry. I'm like, it's fine. I also like beef jerky, so it doesn't bother me one bit if it's overdone. But here, I'm sure not a medium rare man, and I'm definitely not a rare man. I think Miss Jimmy, I think Hagen's I think they call it blue. I think you just hit it, eat it, and that, no, I don't want nothing to do with that. And so, but here they are, they're not even hitting it. They're just eating it. They're just eating it. And so here's Saul now. It says in verse number 33, then they told Saul, saying, behold, the people sin against the Lord, and that they eat with the blood. And he said, ye have transgressed. Roll a great stone unto me this day. The problem with that is he said, ye have transgressed, but he should have said, guys, I'm sorry, this is my fault. Guys, this was my fault. I'm the one that did this to you. I troubled the land. Had I not been so concerned about my enemies, and had I been more concerned about Israel's enemies and God's enemies, and had I not been sitting under that pomegranate tree pouting about the fact that I was in this situation, and been praying and using the priest when he should have used him instead of later when he tried to use him and then decided I don't want to use him, then he could have said, guys, he shouldn't have needed to, but now he's saying he should have said, guys, this is my fault. And verse 34 says, Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people, and say unto them, bring me hither every man his ox, and every man his sheep, and slay them here, and eat, and sin not against the Lord in eating with the blood. So now here's Saul, and he's like, hey, God said don't do that. And I'm sure there's some people scratching their head and like, is this the same guy? Is this the same guy? Is this guy, obviously we live in a different age, but in 2025, like, is this guy bipolar? Does he have like two personalities? Is like good Saul, bad Saul? Is good Saul, hey, we need to do this because God said not to. Hey, we can't do this because, well, what are we doing? And so in verse number 35, and Saul built an altar unto the Lord. Now we're going to see the problem here. We're going to see the problem, Brother Parks. I mean, he's done been made king of Israel. He's done celebrated a military victory. He's done had all these things. We're several years into his kingship. And Saul built an altar unto the Lord. The same was the first altar that he built unto the Lord. Brother Wayne, I don't know. I mean, again, if you've ever been thrust into leadership, I don't know, especially as inadequate as he felt whenever Samuel told him he was going to be king, the fact that he even hid himself among the stuff, whenever the lot came to him to choose him to be king, even though he knew he was going to be king, here he is. You'd have thought, Brother Parks, maybe at the beginning he would have built an altar and said, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. The people expect this, and they've rejected Samuel, and I didn't know Samuel, but I knew about Samuel, and yet here I am, and God, I'm in this position. God, please show me what to do. Didn't happen. Fought a battle and won, didn't build an altar and get down on his knees and say, God, thank you. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't a military leader. I just worked for my father. But now here I am. They're looking at me to be a military leader, and we went out and fought this first battle, and we had this great victory, and it was wonderful. Come up against the Philistines, and he hadn't built an altar. He made a sacrifice he wasn't supposed to make, but didn't build an altar. And finally, he builds an altar. Verse 36, and Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and spoil them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Then Saul said the priest, let us draw near hither unto God. So here's Saul, and he's like, hey, let's go fight. Let's go fight. Hey, now he wasn't fighting earlier. He's sitting under a pomegranate tree. But now that Jonathan has started this, now he's like, hey, let's go fight. And so it says in verse 37, and Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he answered him not that day. So here's Saul, and he's praying, but he's not hearing a response. He's praying, and he's not hearing a response. And honestly, he does something that he probably should do. He wants to find out, why is God not answering us? Verse 38 says, and Saul said, draw ye near hither all the chief of the people, and know and see wherein this sin hath been this day. The sin was his sin. The sin was his sin. In verse 39, for as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. Saul was big on making oaths. He was big on that, Brother Parks. Big on making oaths. And I'll be honest with you, it's better to not make an oath than make one and not fulfill it. And it's better just to not make one at all, just to be honest with you. Because here's Saul, and he's like, I'm going to show him who's boss. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, probably everyone in here, every man in here has worked under or been under a man that probably shouldn't be in leadership. And Brother Parks, they have to do things to show that they're the boss. If you have to do things to show people you're the boss, you probably shouldn't be the boss. You probably shouldn't be that. And so here's Saul, and he's making this big oath. I'm going to show the people. Whoever sinned this day, they're going to find out something. And he said in verse 39, as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. The person that troubled Israel today is going to die. But there was not a man among all the people that answered him. Now, I'll be honest with you. That's pretty good. We know later that Doeg the Edomite, whenever David, and so they said, not us. Verse 34, therefore Saul said unto the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lie. So you think about here, now they get this jar out, and they put these pebbles in, and they shake this jar, and whatever comes out first, that's the lie. And so Saul is thinking, okay, one of these people is going to come out. And so Saul's name's in there, and Jonathan's in there, and the people, and so they sprinkle it around, and Saul and Jonathan come out. So they check it again. Then therefore Saul said unto the Lord of Israel, give a perfect law. And Saul said, and Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between me and Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. Now we know it's Saul, but yet here's God doing something, and he's doing something, and he allows Jonathan to be taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what thou hast done. He said, tell me what you've done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod. That was in mine hand, and lo, I must die. He didn't even say, I wasn't even there when you made the oath. I didn't even hear you say the oath. I didn't even know that I'm going to be held responsible for, obviously ignorance is not always an excuse, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it is like, hey, I just didn't know. Like, you go to different places, and sometimes different places have different laws, and yes, it's your responsibility to find out what those laws are. But again, sometimes you say, look, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have done it if I'd have known it, but I didn't know. That's not what he said. He says, this is what I've done. Took my hand, got a little honey, tasted it, and really, I got to die because I just tasted a little honey. In verse 44 it says, and Saul answered, God do so and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. Now here's the man that just wrought the great victory for the army of Israel. Here's the man that just won the battle for the army Israel just because he had faith in God and said, hey, God's not bound. He's not bound by having a huge army. He can save by many or by few. Oh, shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? God forbid. Now here's Saul, and again he's the leader, and yet here are the people, and they wouldn't rat Jonathan out, and yet here God allowed Saul to find out Jonathan ate that honey, and Saul not having an ounce of compassion, not having an ounce of common sense, not having an ounce of anything, except, no, this is your fault, Jonathan. Said, you're going to die. And the people said, as the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground. Not one hair of his head fall to the ground. For he hath wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan that he died not. Even the people recognized that Jonathan fought for Israel and fought for Israel's God, and between Jonathan's faith and Jonathan's courage and Jonathan's willingness to go and do something, whereas Saul was sitting under that pomegranate tree just making rules. Nobody can eat anything today. The whole reason the Philistines were in the shape they were in at the end of the day was because of Jonathan. And the people said, not today, Saul. Not today. And it should have been a cautionary tale to Saul to not just be spouting out random oaths. Verse 46, then Saul went up from the fallen the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. And so now you're going to see in verse number 47 that Saul, again, not every one of his first military effort was a success. And then it seemed like he had some failures, but not every one of them was a failure. Verse 47 says, so Saul took the kingdom over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab and against the children of Ammon and against Edom and against the kings of Zobah and against the Philistines, and whithersoever he turned himself, he vexed them. And so it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all terrible. It appears that he kind of learned some lessons. It appears that he learned some lessons, and then he went out and did what the people of Israel wanted. They wanted a king that would go and fight their enemies. Verse 48 says, and he gathered a host and smote the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hand of them that spoiled them. And so, like I said, it wasn't all bad. There was some good. There was some good times. There were some times where they fought and they won. If you think about it, in a sports realm, if you play for a team, if you ever played for a team in some kind of sport and they never won, it's just miserable. It's just miserable. But yet, maybe you didn't play for a team that won all the time. But if you just have to win sometimes to be like, you know what, I'm going to keep practicing. I'm going to keep going. And so God allowed Saul to have these victories. He allowed him to go out and have those victories and protect Israel and do what he was called to do. And so next week we're going to get into another sad chapter in Saul's life. Probably the saddest part is that he's going to be completely rejected from being king, and God's going to have to choose another one. Thank you.